Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very sorry that you had to wait so long time, but sometimes technical problems happen. First of all, I would like to say many thanks to the organizers of this conference inviting me. And second, I would like to give my greatest respect to two men of your country, Mr. Johann Heine and Michael Tellinger, because what they are doing with so much enthusiasm, presenting and researching and spending so much money on researching of your own historical culture, researching on the stone circles and on the Adams calendar. So please give them a big action. I think it would be better for many governments to spend more money on archaeological researches than in spending money in war and in armors.
Maybe make Johann stand up.
Johann, please stand up.
Johann Heine, just take a bow. Please stand up, sir. Johann Heine, everybody.
And please help them to go ahead, because I'm quite sure that these researches will go very soon all over the world, around the world. It is a real great sensation, and I had the opportunity to see some of those circles, and I have to say it's wonderful. I start my presentation with some speeches which I found in the internet, and I loved it. There is no mystery about who built the Great Pyramid or what the methods of construction were, and the Sphinx shows no signs of water damage. There were no humans in the Americas before 20,000 BC, and I can prove there were humans there at least 400,000 years ago. The first civilization dates back no further than 6,000 BC. This is a great joke. There are no documented anomalous, unexplained, or enigmatic data to take into account. I will show you some. There are no lost or unaccounted for civilizations. There were. Let the evidence to the contrary be damned. No, we are researching. I do not fight against the scientists, but I think they should open their eyes and they should research on some of our findings. I think they might find out many strange things. All of you know the legends about giants and little people. I was invited 2003 from Professor Wayne Deloria, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. He was the most famous North American Indian. He took rights against the government for his indigenous people, and he was a great researcher. He invited me to a 3-day meeting with 15 elders of the big North American tribes, and the 3-day meeting was about giants and little people. Until this meeting, I had never any experience or data or facts about giants and little people. But after that meeting, it really started, and I was very much shocked about some of the findings. You see here, on your right side, a normal human man with about 180 centimeters, and next to him, you see skeletons where we found documents or stories or legends about giants. The one before the last one on the left side is about 7.60 meters. I got the information that Father Carlos Crespi in the 1962 was called by people from Ecuador from a mountainside because a heavy storm brought down a part of a platform, and they found a lot of destroyed bones. And as they didn't know what kind of bones these are, they called Father Carlos Vaca, who was working in a hospital, and he recognized that these bones are from a human. But he also found out that this skeleton must have been the size of 7.6 meters. Here you see Professor J.J. Hertag, an American researcher, in front of the big human footstep in your own country. So that means giants also lived in South America. In South Africa. Here you can see a photo with some of the bones. Father Wacker recognized some of the bones and he described them. When I found the family, because he passed away just 1 month before I could find his niece, she allowed me to bring some of the bones with me to Vienna, and we had several researches in Vienna. This is a part of the skull, and it must be so old because some of the parts of this bone were already crystallized. This is one of the bones I brought with me, and it was identified by several scientists as a human heel bone. But the professor of anatomy of the Vienna University, he checked the bones, and finally he said, I cannot believe it. It looks definitely 100% like a human heel bone, but it is impossible because it is at least 5 times bigger. Next day, he visited me again, and he brought some of the human bones, real human bones, with him, and he compared it, and definitely he said, still it's impossible for me, but these are definitely human bones. The skeleton was 7.6 meters in size. This is another side of the bone. Here you have a part of the nose bone, also 5 times bigger. And that's a so-called os occipitale under the skull bone, which makes us able to turn the head. It's again 5 times bigger. We found old documents from a Spanish historian. He was half Inca and half Spanish. He was writing in 1576. Today we found several human skeletons at the coast of Esmeraldas in Ecuador, and they were all 5 times bigger than we were. At this time, a Spanish man had the size of about 150 centimeters. He was just a little bit smaller than me. In the Museum de las Culturas Aborigines in Cuenca, we found these eggs. The egg is 70 centimeters in size. It's granite, very heavy. You can even see where some rope was around it, and it was definitely used. In the museum, of course, it is mentioned as ceremonial eggs. And we did measurements with existing real stone axes, and the size of this one is again 5 times bigger. This is another big, like this size, stone axe, also in the same museum. And this is another one like this size. So that means a 70 centimeter stone axe wouldn't have been able to use for a normal human to use it or to handle it. But for a man with a size of 7.5, 7.6 meters, it would have been definitely possible. When I had the exhibition Unsolved Mysteries in Switzerland, we did a model of a 7.6 meter skeleton, which you can see part of it here, and you can see that the big man even didn't reach the knee of this skeleton. Here you can see part of the skeleton and the skull we had to do like this size that 2 men could hold it. Here we have a graphic of the South African petrified stone footprint, and we did a measurement of a normal man foot size of 1.7 meter. He would have a shoe size of number 41, and on the other side you see this guy's shoe size 177, and we measured out that he might have had 1.6 ton of weight. So now, of course, a normal scientist would say it is impossible in that size because the heart wouldn't be strong enough to take care of the blood pressure. But who knows when they really lived? And we have also animals in a very big size. We have plants in an oversize. So why not human could have had a big size? This is a skeleton of one of the giants they found in the jungle of Bolivia in some caves. The size of every skeleton was about 2.5, 2.6 meters. The interesting thing on these skulls is that the jaw is very much stronger than our jaw. The size, of course, with 2.6 meters, they have to have a bigger skull. But for me, the most interesting thing is that we, as Homo sapiens sapiens, we have the fontanella and we have 3 bone plates. These skulls do not have any bone plate. The whole top of the skull is closed. So that means for me, those skeletons cannot be Homo sapiens or any other known human type. I hope in 1 or 2 months I'm able to fly to Bolivia. We have the agreement with the army that we can visit those places. And then, of course, I ask them to bring at least 1 or 2 small bones with me that we can do a DNA analysis and an age dating in Vienna. I'm wondering what the result will be. This is a very huge stone found in a coal mine in USA. The coal in this area is around 68 million years by geologists, and you can see a petrified skull in the stone, which is also much bigger than a model of a human skull seen on the same photo. We had this stone also in Europe, and if you knocked on the top of this skull, you can hear that inside it was whole. That means, for me, it looks really that this is an original fossilized human skull, but also oversized. This is one of several skeletons found in Utah, in the United States. Most of these skeletons had also the size between 2.5 and 2.6, 2.7 meters. If they would have found only one skeleton like this, of course, most of the scientists would immediately say that was a kind of sickness, because also in our days we have several people with a very big size, with a very big size of 2.5 meters, 2.3 meters, but they have a kind of sickness. So if it would be just one skeleton, I would agree, but in Utah they found several of them, and altogether very close in some caves. That's another skeleton from the same place, Utah in United States. This is an old photo from a museum in Malta in the Mediterranean, and you see here several very strange skulls, elongated skulls, but to the back side. And a few years ago, these skulls were no more seen in the museum. And a friend of mine, an Italian publisher of an archaeological magazine, went there with the Italian television, and with the help of the ministry, they got the allowance to visit the museum. And the director was searching long time until he found in the storage the skulls in a box, and he brought the skulls. And you can see here, again, a very strange thing. Normal human, we have 3 stone plates, and this elongated skull has only one bone line square over the skull. So for me also, it would be very interesting, and I'm wondering why they never did yet an age dating and especially a DNA analysis. It's so far interesting because in Malta you have also many big stone monuments and stone buildings. Archaeological dating is going back several thousands of years, but still I think those buildings are much older than we know until today. Here you can see that the size of a normal skull and this strange skull is quite different. This is my friend Adriano Forgione with the director of the museum holding this skull. So I think these people must have had also the size at least over 2 meters. In Crete, in the Mediterranean, a friend of mine and very big researcher, Professor Ernst Muldashev from Russia, found with his researchers, because when he's doing researching or discoveries, he's always accompanied by at least 4 or 5 different scientists. He is Russia's most famous eye doctor because he did the only functioning eye transplantation until now ever happened. And he is also a member of the Academy of Science of Moscow. He went to Crete 3 years ago with his colleagues, scientists, and archaeologists, paleontologists, geologists, mathematicians. So they found underground a huge labyrinth, all made into hard stone. The entrance was always from the bottom of the earth going down, then a smaller entrance, and you can see that this entrance was able to be closed with this laying stone in front of the entrance. Also a perfect stone work. This is another entrance to the same underground labyrinth. And here you have one of hundreds of tiles, very high, very big, but perfect done. And the wondering thing is, because an engineer and an expert on stonework told me, if you do a tunnel or a labyrinth or whatever in stone, the stone material which you bring out has to be in volume 3 times bigger than the empty space. But the very strange thing here on this labyrinth side is then that on top of the earth, it's flat, it's farmland, there are no small stone mountains, which should be, because the labyrinth itself is too big. So nobody can explain where the material which was taken out from this labyrinth was brought. This is another photo of the inside of the labyrinth. They also found a perfect room inside this labyrinth. And this is another story with pictures from Professor Muldashev, because he was many times in Tibet because of his eye research, and he got friend with some of the monks in Tibet. And he heard about the story of Shambhala and underground world. And once he was friend with them, they told him about the Samadhi caves. So he asked what Samadhi means. And they explained him that in these Samadhi caves, there are human from normal size up to 10 meters in the lotus seat. The body has 0 function, but they are not dead. They explained that these people are connected with a silver string with the universe. And on his last trip, he got the allowance to go into one of these Samadhi caves. He was not allowed to bring light, he was not allowed to bring a camera, but he has to take care 1 week, nothing to eat, just meditation, and then he could go inside. And he could go so far that he could see the silhouettes of humans in real different size, up to 10 meters. But then he got headache, and they explained him that usually if a normal person tries to go into one of these caves, he will get immediately a headache, getting strong and stronger, and finally he dies because these caves are energetically protected. So when he returned to Russia, he wrote a book about the Samadhis, but even he is Russia's most famous eye doctor, and even he is a member of the Academy of Science. Nobody believed him. So when I got in contact with him and I told him about the bones from Ecuador, he came with an expert to Vienna, and he stayed 2 days with me. And his expert also identified the os occipitale and the heel bone as a human. So that means that these bones, this skeleton was really 7.6 meters in size. In exchange, Professor Muldashev gave me some photos from northern Syria, which you can see here on this picture. And you see 3 footsteps. But of course, for the official science, these footsteps are human-made, artificial made, as a kind of ceremony or whatsoever. So Professor Muldashev when he heard about these footsteps, he went there again with some other experts, scientists, and they did a lot of research on the spot. They filled in water into the 3 steps. And you can see if someone walks into a weak, soft material, you have 2 straight footsteps. And then if you make 1 step ahead and you want to go back in your further position or back out of this material, your heel is making a deeper step than normal. And you can see here that the footstep in front, definitely the heel was going down deeper. So they broke out a part of this so-called stone, and they made analysis in Russia, and they found out that this is not a stone, it was cement. So it was the approval that really a man, again with a size, according to the footsteps, with a size of at least 6 to 7.5 meters. Here you have the real size comparing with a human size. Now we go to Sardinia in the Mediterranean. There are at least 6,000, some of them in a good condition, some of them completely destroyed, so-called nurages, stone towers, some of them with a size of at least 20 to 25 meters, made with huge, big rocks, perfect done. And for the official Italian archaeologists, these stone towers are defense towers. But the strange thing for me and for many others is if you make a defense tower to protect you, your comrades, and your family against any attack, would you make a stone tower without window, without shooting hole, and with only 1 entrance? It doesn't give any sense, because you cannot defend from inside the tower if you have only 1 entrance, because the enemy just have to bring some wood, make a lot of fire, and he would smoke you out automatically from this tower. Another strange thing was that close to some of these towers, there are little hills. And if I would make a defense tower, I would choose the small hill, because then the enemy has to come up. But many of those so-called defense towers are on the flat countryside. Here you see one of the still very good condition, nurage. And here you see on top a friend of mine, and you can see how big they are. And this Gruppo Ricerche Sardinia is a group of private researchers, not scientists. But since the last several years, they went to some of those important nurages on many days, in wintertime, summertime, autumn, springtime, at the equinoctial days, at the sunsets, at the sun rising, and they found out that these towers had astronomical functions. One of the towers is very interesting because there is one hole on top of the tower, and only on one day in summertime, on 21st of June, at noon, the sun projects inside the tower on a place where there was a big stone, like a kind of altar. The face, the light, like a bull. And the bull, in many countries, in many myths and legends, has a very important role. And these researchers found out that a star called the bull star was functioning as a Venus in our days before the so-called flood around 12,000 years ago. But they think, upon their researches, that these towers are even bigger. Why I talk about the nurages? Because in Sardinia are many, many stories about giants, and there are also many caves. Caves, they call it the giant tombs. And those giant tombs have the form like a bull's head. Here you can see this nurage where the sun is projecting the bull's head inside on this little altar, stone place, ceremonial place. And in the front, at the beginning of the tower, there are little holes on the bottom of the tower. So also it would be impossible to use them as defense, because you only might hit your enemy in his feet. So they also checked out on 21st of June, at the winter solstice, summer solstice, they found out that sunset and sun rising where the sunshine was straight going through two of these little holes, on one side entering, on the other side going out. They made some smoke to see exactly the sun rays, and for them, these nurages had astronomical function, but more they don't know yet, but they are still researching. That means you must not be a scientist to find some very interesting things. And that's also, again, I come back to Mr. Johann Heine and Michael Tellinger. They are not scientists, but they found out more than many of your scientists found out until today. This is the entrance of a so-called giant tomb. You see, it was a long tomb, and on the right side of the entrance, there were constructed like the bull's head. And around those tombs, very old persons in the age of 85, 90 years, when I was there at a conference with Andrew Collins last November, they told us that in the 1935, 1940s, they opened some of these giant tombs, and they brought away very big skeletons. So again, an approval for those people, because it was not only one man who told this story, but several of them. So it must be reality. I believe in it. This is the entrance of a giant tomb. And this is the top of one of the giant tombs, and you can see that we just tried to show if 3 people are standing around this big, very heavy stone, you cannot place so many persons that they even would be able to lift a little bit this heavy stone. So the big question is, how and who was able to bring up on top of this cave this heavy round stone? This is another entrance of a giant tomb. Age dating, archaeological wise, goes back 1,800, 2,000 years. But then a friend of Adriano Forgione was diving at the coast side of Sardinia, and he found on the bottom of the sea one of these giant tombs. That means it must have been built long time ago, at least, most probably 10, 12,000 years ago, when the sea was much lower until today. This is a destroyed giant tomb. And here you can see that also these stoneworks were done very precisely. Some of the blocks are so perfect, fitting into each other, it looks like the South American stone buildings, stone walls in Sacsayhuaman, in other places. But how they really were done, it's very hard for us to explain until those days, even for the scientists. Then we had the chance to visit the inside of the island, and I was shown this very big menhir, which looks exactly the same like we saw on the presentation before. And for me, one of the most interesting things was, in the middle of this island, we found stone cuts, rail cuts. You might have heard already that in Malta were found the same rail cuts in stone. The explanation of the scientists is that it was because they were driving with their horse carriages so long until these stone cuts were done. I don't think that's so easy, and especially inside Sardinia, where nobody is living, only a few farmers. They explained, yeah, the Roman army, they occupied Sardinia, but I don't think that they occupied Sardinia that long, that they were driving with their horse carriages so many times over these stone plates that they could make these deep rail cuts. And another strange thing for me was, because there were about 15, 20 meters, these rail cuts, and then was plain earth. And again, after certain distance, again there were stone plates with these rail cuts. So that means that in between are missing those stones with these rail cuts. There is no explanation until our days yet. Close by to this place, we found also stone caves, some of them in very hard stone, going back 3-4 rooms inside the stone. What functions they had, nobody can explain. Another very strange thing in Sardinia is that there were also pyramids. Here you can see one restored pyramid. It looks like the Babylonian constructions. This is a destroyed giant grave. And then on a hill, we were shown a lot of precise done big stone blocks, and they think, and I can believe, that these are stone blocks from a destroyed pyramid. But for me, again, a very strange thing is that every of those laying stones on different sides, they have all on one side a perfect crystallization. And an old gentleman there with 86 years, he showed us these strange places inside Sardinia. He brought us away from these sites to a small hill, and he showed us a huge stone with several markings on it. And for me, there is a building under earth, and he said the archaeologists, they are not interested at all to do there any excavations. And for private persons in Sardinia, it is forbidden to make any excavations. Otherwise, this researcher group would start immediately with the excavation. Now we are going back to Professor Muldaschew, because he allowed me to show you some of his researches around the world. You might have heard about the Mount Kailash. Mount Kailash is the secret holy mountain in Tibet where nobody is allowed to climb up. Professor Muldaschew's and his colleagues' research gave them the result that the top of the Mount Kailash is a pyramid. Then they did satellite research measurements about the height of the Mount Kailash, which is usually known as 6,704 meters, and they found out that the Mount Kailash is 6,666 meters. Then they found out that the distance between Mount Kailash and the North Pole is 6,660 kilometers. And there is a historical legend in Tibet that the Mount Kailash, around the Mount Kailash, was the city of the gods. Further research and measurements gave them the result that the distance from Mount Kailash to Stonehenge is 6,666 kilometers. The distance through from Stonehenge to the Bermuda Triangle at certain point, but this is difficult to say, was that the right point, was about 6,660 kilometers, and from there to the Easter Island, 6,666 kilometers. From Easter Islands, the distance to South Pole is 6,666 kilometers. From South Pole to Mount Kailash, 2 times 6,666 kilometers. And from Mount Kailash to North Pole, 6,660 kilometers. So they made further measurements, and the distance from North Pole to the Great Pyramid of Giza is 6,666 kilometers. From North Pole to Mount Kailash, the same distance, and between the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Mount Kailash, 4,999 kilometers. That means in all the historical buildings and monuments, there is always a mathematical information included. That's what Professor Muldaschew thinks. And they did a lot of photos with special cameras around the Mount Kailash, and I just want to show the most interesting for me. You can see here the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see that these present half portraits of human in stone in the mountain, and each of these stone portraits has the size of 700 meters. Now the big question is, who would have been able to make stone half portraits into a mountainside with a size of 700 meters? Now we are changing to South America, to Ecuador. There are many, many stories, legends about a huge underground tunnel system which connects South America from Colombia until down to Chile and Argentina. The most famous story is going about the Cuevas de los Tallos in Ecuador. There were several expeditions already inside, and I was lucky to get a contact with an Ecuadorian who was in the Cuevas de los Tallos with a researcher group and a television team from Ecuador last year and 2 years ago. And he told me that they could research on 16 kilometers, huge mostly man-made, not everything, but mostly man-made underground tunnel system. And he provided me this photo, and he explained me that they found a huge hole. You can see the entrance of this hole. It's about 30 meters high, and you can see a human. But this is only a wall painting, and the little black thing next to it, I have to show it. This is the real human, and the big one is a wall painting. And I was really surprised when he told me that this wall painting man has the size of, you got it, 7 meters and 50. So now we have a wall painting, we have a huge underground tunnel system, we have an oversized big hall, and a wall painting with a size of 7.5 meters. So the Cuevas de los Tallos got very famous because Neil Armstrong was with a delegation in the 17th inside the Cuevas de los Tallos. The result was they didn't find anything, but I met a former ambassador of Ecuador, and when he was young in the 70s, he was there in order for the government to check the operation, and he told me that they brought out many wood boxes with something, but he doesn't know what it was. So the story about the Cuevas de los Tallos came from Juan Moritz, who was a researcher, Hungarian-born, Argentinian, and he was a so-called treasure hunter. And again, I got the connection to Juan Moritz concerning the giants, because when I visited the place where the 7.6 meter giant was found, the landowner told me that after Padre Vaca was transporting all the bones away, he was returning with Juan Moritz and 2 other gentlemen, and they had a kind of technical instrument, but this farmer couldn't say what it was. And they told him that close by to the place where the bones were found, they have they got the result that there are still 3 big skeletons underground. So we did further researches, and we have the guarantee that still there are 3 7.6 meter giants underground. And as soon as I have the financing, we will go there and we will excavate at least one of them, because before nobody would believe me that human with the size of 7.6 meter ever could have existed. But you have a petrified footstep in your own country with a size of 120 centimeters. Here you have a human dam found in close to Israel. And here is the comparison with a normal on top and this human dam. Also, this human must have been a real big size. This is a drawing of a man, of a researcher from Utah, United States. He found a cave, and as he didn't bring a camera, and he's not using a camera normally, he made a drawing of 2 mummies he found inside that cave. The man had the size of 3 meters, red hair, and a long beard, and a kind of armor, and a big sword with him. The lady was blonde, 2.7 meters, And he brought out of this cave 60 stone boxes, perfect done stone boxes. And every of these boxes included many bronze plates with a completely unknown writing. And you can see that the boxes were covered with organic material, and the age dating he did on the covering material gave the result of 4,800 plus minus 100 years. Here you see many of the bronze plates, and you can see that the writing, it looks a little bit like the Sumerian writing, but it is completely different. And on this one, you see the ink carving like he did the drawing of the lady mummy. This is another bronze plate from the same stone boxes. This is Rex Gilroy, an Australian researcher who did forms from big footsteps in Australia. And now we are changing to the little people. This skull was found in Morocco in an area where there are fossils and geological dating around 300 million years. A professor found this human skull. They did X-rays researches on it, and they are quite sure that this is not an ape, but even an ape 300 million years ago would be an impossibility. And the size of this skull is the size of an apple. Here you have the front view of this skull. And another story again with the giants is that researchers found in Morocco hundreds of oversized and very heavy axes. So if one makes a ceremonial axe, its ceremonial means something special. He would make one axe, but no one would make hundreds of big stone axes for ceremonial functions. This mummy was found in the Atacama Desert in Chile. We got it to Vienna, and several experts, and especially the professor for anatomy of the university in Vienna, was checking it for 2 hours. And finally he said, this is definitely not a fetus, because normal anthropologists will say immediately 14 centimeters, this is definitely a fetus. And he said, as he saw hundreds and hundreds of fetus, he said, this is impossible a fetus because the bones are too concrete, too strong. A fetus in this size would be around 5 months, and the feet were still around it. And he checked the ribs. This mummy has only 10 ribs, and we have 12 ribs. The skull is very strange. This mummy has little teeth, so definitely a fetus in the age of 5 months would not have little teeth. So a few months after, I received the documentation from Russia. The only thing he said, I don't think this is an adult. I think because of the bone structure and everything, I think it is a child in the age between 4 and 6 years. A few months later, I got a documentation from Russia that an old lady in the age of 84 years, age debil, she was going to a small village because she was living outside the village alone in the woods. She broke down and they brought her to a hospital. And when she woke up, she started crying. She has to go home because her baby would die. And as everybody in this area knew that she is living alone, they thought she is now completely age-debil or crazy. And after a few days, they brought her to the psychic hospital. And a nurse there, after a few days, she thought there must be something reality with what she is talking, and she called the police. And the police visited the house, opened the door, and they found a mummy, exactly as you see this little mummy. But the difference is that the mummy in Russia was 28 centimeters. That means if the professor in Vienna was right, and I think he was right, the mummy you see on these pictures with 14 centimeters was definitely a child in the age of 4 to 6 years, because in the adult age it would have the double size, and that means the mummy from Russia would have been an adult. So they asked the lady, when she found this being, because she explained that it was alive. So she said she found it in the woods, and she thought it's a child thrown away by the parents, and she brought it back home. And this being, I would say this being, was only eating sugar water. She explained that it didn't eat anything else but only sugar water, and it was living with her for several months. So we have definitely no explanation what it is. On the documentation you could see the police, you could see the interview with some doctors in this area, but then people from Moscow came and they brought it to Moscow. This is another photo, and the mummy from Russia, I'm sorry I didn't bring the video with me, but it looked exactly the same. Also the strange skull, everything same. And it was alive. Here you see the bone structures. No fetus in the age of 5 months would have the same bone structures. The fingers also quite different with a normal human finger. Now we go to another field, to the elongated, or for me some of them so-called elongated skulls, worldwide found. The explanation worldwide was that they did deformation to look like the gods. Which gods? That's a big question. This skull is definitely deformed and was found outside Austria. Where it came, they don't know exactly, but most probably from Asia, when we had in Europe the invasions from the Mongols or other civilizations. This is an Egyptian skull. This shows how in Peru the deformation was done. This is a skull from Tiahuanaco. Tiahuanaco, also concerning megalithomania, is very, very interesting for me especially, and I hope I can visit it on my next trip, because the age dating of Tiahuanaco goes back to 1,800, 2,000 years. But friends of mine, archaeologists in Bolivia, informed me that when they did a ground-penetrate radar for the construction of a new street, and they sent me the radar photos, they found a pyramid underground, and the top of the pyramid was 10 meters underground. So I do not think that in 2,000 years the earth would move that much up that a pyramid still is 10 meters, the top of the pyramid is 10 meters underground. So also in Bolivia there is still a lot to discover, especially about the age of human. This skull is from Mexico in Veracruz. These are all skulls from Veracruz. And this is one of the very strange skulls. We made this photo on a visit 2000 to a small museum in Ica. Ica is very close to the famous Nazca lines. It looks like a real cone head. And I personally do not think this is a deformed skull. This is another skull from the same museum. And the explanation on this skull is a deformed child skull. But look at the bone material. And as you saw before, like they are doing this, the skull deformation with bindings around the children's head, how could the child's bone getting the double or triple bone material just through bone deformation, skull deformation? I asked many anthropologists, they couldn't give me a real answer. And especially on this skull, it would be very easy to do a DNA analysis, especially because on that skull you can see the hairs. So it would be easy to do an age dating and a DNA research. But maybe they are a little bit scared about the result which might come out. This is another collection from the same museum. This small museum in Ica is called Maria Reiche Museum. Maria Reiche was a German researcher. She spent most of her life in researching the Nazca lines. This is one skull, human skull, at the National Museum in Lima, and they did a model how this human must have looked like. A deformation to elongate the skull is possible. A deformation with these lines wouldn't be possible, because to do this, how you can close the center of your skull with bindings, it would be quite impossible. Now we are changing to the age of human. I know that the cradle of human is outside Johannesburg, and I hope I do not offend anybody of your people in your country, but I just want to show some of the pictures, some of the researches worldwide, which looks like human were even much, much older. For example, on this picture, you can see a petrified dinosaur's step, and next to it, a human step. But it was not a simple one found, a single one. There were lines of human footsteps and lines of dinosaurs' footsteps. Like you can see on this photo, the human footstep and the dinosaur's footstep found in the Biloxi River in Texas. And as the researchers there showed some of these steps, the complaint from the scientists was that this was definitely human-made to build up a sensation, and especially because the finder of those steps were creationists. So automatically, it was human done to do a sensation or to prove that the creationists are right. But a few years later, it was very dry, and they broke away some of these parts, and you won't believe it, they found under this stone another footsteps from human and dinosaurs. So the age dating would go very, very far back in history. Now we are in Ica, where you saw before the elongated skulls. This is Dr. Cabrera. He passed away 2003, and I visited him 2000 and 2001, and we did the last interview with him. On the second trip, he allowed us to photograph and especially to film all this, and we did a DVD with all my material we did in the past, and I wanted to bring some of them with me here to South Africa that you could see more details, because in 1 or 2 hours you cannot show everything. But unfortunately, the pressing was on delay, and the DVD will be on Amazon next month. So if anyone is interested, you can get it on Amazon. So Dr. Cabrera, his collection, there are many email files, internet stories. Officially, or for this official scientists, the collection of his at least 12,000 stones showing dinosaurs, showing human with dinosaurs, showing medical treatments and everything, is officially a fraud. I visited 2 times his collection. I found out that he also, in his collection, he had some new done stones. That's reality. He was collecting these stones, and I think upon the moment when he couldn't get new ones, he really gave order to do artificial new ones. Because on my second visit on the last day, he told me, now, because we are friends, I really show you my very top secret little room. And he opened a little room, and inside were several stones, and one of it was the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And I looked at the patina and the other stones, and I know definitely that these stones were done maybe this year, 1 year before, or 2 years. So his really biggest problem was that upon a certain date, he gave order to do new stones. But the majority, at least 90% of his stones, are old, because 3 years ago, a Spanish researcher, a man and a woman researcher, they went to Peru. They got friend with a man who spoke in several TV and newspapers interviews that he did all these 13,000 stones by himself, which is normal for me, because if he would have said that he found the stones and he sold it for very little money to Dr. Cabrera, he would have been brought immediately to jail. So he had to say that he did all these stones. These 2 researchers got friend with him. They stayed in his area over some weeks, and finally he brought them out to the desert. And he said in this area he did excavations and he found most of these stones. They started digging on several places, and finally they succeeded and they found original stones there with the same strange carvings like in the collection of Dr. Cabrera. Now the big question is, did dinosaurs really die out 65 million years ago or later? And the other big question is, did really human and dinosaurs live together? This is just one side, one part of his museum. Unfortunately, the museum was partly destroyed at the big earthquake hitting Peru a few years ago. But his sister is taking care of the collection, and she's collecting money to rebuild the little museum. Here you can see one of, I think, the original stones, dinosaurs eating a man, dinosaurs together with human, dinosaurs That's another interesting stone showing 2 persons, a step pyramid and the sun. In my researches worldwide, I always found the sun, and it's no wondering the sun is necessary for human life, and it had a big role in every civilization, in every human life. But one of the strangest stones there are the 2 men with telescope watching some stars and a comet. And many of his stones are showing operations. And of course, Dr. Cabrera was a medical doctor. And of course, the explanation of the scientists against his collection was automatically, of course, he is showing operations on his stones because he's a doctor and he ordered several operations. Here it looks like a very strange operation through the mouth with again 2 men. And then on the last day, he allowed us and he told us he has another very interesting room, which usually he never showed the visitors of the museum. In the backyard, he opened a door, and there was a long room with left side, right side, filled with ceramics, completely filled. But now, my question was, if he gave order to do these thousands of ceramics, terracotta, what was his reason? He never showed them. He never sold them. So, again, showing human together with dinosaurs, and on many of his artifacts is always showing a leaf. And I was wondering, what does this leaf mean? And strange, in many other stone carvings from other countries, I also saw several times the same leaf from other cultures, from other time. What it really means, I don't know. Maybe some of you might have an idea, or some of the persons watching this presentation could give me an idea. I would be thankful. This leaf, so many times presented. Here, the fight of a man and a dinosaurs. I asked him if I can take part of one of those broken statues. He didn't allow me. So now, could be that they were new, or maybe they were real old and he didn't allow me. But the idea behind, I don't understand. If someone gives order for thousands of artifacts and he puts them away into a room and never shows it, never sells it, there is, for me, no logistic behind it. Also, in these ceramics were presented many operations. And the strange thing is, you can see again here the leaf, and the man laying has a different face, like the man who is doing the operation. Another photo of the operation. Here, both of the persons or beings presented have the same face. Here you can see one by one, some of them same, some of them different, presenting different operations. Heart transplantation, brain operations, many things. So this was the Ica collection. And a friend of mine, a geologist, he is now in the age of 70. He spent 2 weeks with Dr. Cabrera about 10 years ago, and he is really a professional geologist. He was working all over the world, also in South Africa, and he spent 2 weeks after his retirement with Dr. Cabrera, and he told me what I thought upon my feeling, that 90% of the stones are really very old, but he has new ones too. Now, these photos are from a big collection of over 30,000 pieces from Acámbaro in Mexico. Acámbaro is a small village, and close to the village is a very big mountain, the so-called Bull Mountain. And in the 1930s, 1940s, a German called Waldemar Julsrud found some of ceramics on this mountain, and the farmers there told him that always they found some ceramics, and he offered them a little money for each piece they bring him. And they made excavation on this mountain, and finally in his collection, when he passed away, he had more than 32,000 artifacts, terracotta artifacts, showing human with dinosaurs, very strange humans, some of them looking like Phoenicians, some of them looking like Egyptians, and several other civilizations. But the strangest one definitely like dinosaurs. And this was in the 1930s, 1940s. And of course, until today, for the official scientists in Mexico, this collection is a fraud. There were several age dating in United States on some of the pieces, and the age dating you will see soon after the photos. All kind of dinosaurs. How could people know about 2,500 up to 6,000 years ago how the dinosaurs were looking? This is a big question. Oh, sorry. This, I just want to show you the DVD in case you might be interested, and I know that I have time, more time? I'm running out of time, so I just want to show you the age dating done in 1968 at the Isotopes Incorporation, New York. Carbon dating, carbon-14 dating, 3,590 plus minus 100 years, 6,480 plus minus 170 years, and 3,060 plus minus 120 years. And 1972 thermoluminescence research, University of Pennsylvania, 2,500 BC. At least 2,500 years ago, the big question is, how did those people know how dinosaurs are looking like? And I have many photos from other artifacts, and if I would show you these photos, you would say immediately, this is from Egypt. But it doesn't say for me that Egyptians went to South America. There is the other legend, so-called legend, about the sunken continents Atlantis and Mu. And maybe I can show you tomorrow in my presentation on the other artifacts what we think is an approval that Atlantis and Mu really existed. I thank you for your time and hope I can see you tomorrow again. Thank you.